The most important thing I saw, which is such an important lesson for anyone running a business in Silicon Valley, is that the pace of decision-making matters far more than the accuracy of decision-making. It's always been like one of my 3 big mottos.
Say more about that for entrepreneurs. Unpack that.
For me, like my number one, my 3 things are always like grit, bias to action, and then narrative. But like bias to action, the rate at which you can make decisions is a far greater predictor of success than the accuracy of the decisions you do make. And so you have to be willing to embrace failure. You have to be willing to make decisions that could result in something not being done correctly or making a mistake, and even getting embarrassed on the internet, by making mistakes and having to call people like Paul Graham and apologize for them. And
that was a big moment.
But the problem is, as a business scales, as professional managers are brought in, their incentive is to not make mistakes. Their incentive is to do things that are predictably going to work and are predictably not going to fail. And therefore, they avoid taking the risks and they reduce the rate of action, the rate of decision making. And that's why so many businesses ultimately don't scale past some sort of inflection point, or when founders that are willing to push that envelope step out, everything starts to fall apart. And it's so critically important, I think, to look at that as being, I think Elon's defining trait and characteristic is that this, regardless of the scale of the organization and the enterprise, he's still willing to act with that level of bias to action that you typically see in a small startup.
Okay.
And put his reputation at risk. Yeah.
Just to sum that up, I sat in a meeting yesterday. He said that if we're not rolling back 10% of the time, we haven't pushed hard enough.
Right.
Wonderful. There you go.
So, I mean, it's like if you're never rolling anything back because you never make a mistake, maybe you're just not moving fast enough. You don't have enough.
You're not ambitious enough. You're not fast enough.
You don't have enough of a bias towards action. You're too afraid of making a mistake.
By the way, here's what's so interesting about the views feature is that a bunch of websites, I think it started because Instagram did a bunch of apps, deprecated, likes because they felt that it was part of this negative cycle. And so they took all this stuff away. And basically views is going sort of back in that direction and giving more granularity in terms of outside in social engagement on a post, which is, I think, interesting to see. It's happening in a moment where all these other sites and apps are actually going in the opposite direction.
Well, it's like a standard feature on YouTube, and it's very powerful for YouTube's network effects because it shows you how many views you get. So it discourages people from using other sites because you get the most distribution on YouTube. So it's weird that other social networks don't want to follow suit. I mean, in 1 hour...
They had it, but they deprecated. That's what's so interesting.
But I guess, my point is we've only had this feature for an hour and I didn't realize how much distribution my tweets were getting. And it definitely undermines my incentive to want to go use some other platform when I see the distribution I'm getting on Twitter.
Well, if you're getting 10 times more distribution than the New York Times, what's going to happen is people will stop listening and reading the New York